This is the spherically distorted panorama image that I exported from 3ds Max in the previous video. I'd like to show you how you can create a Java-based panorama. And I've put a couple of support files in the Panoramas subfolder called panorama.html. This is a web page. And the ptviewer.jar for Java archive. The PT Viewer is a free and open source panorama viewer. Double-click on Panorama HTML to look at the panorama in your default browser. The advantage to having this display as a Java applet is that most people have Java pre-installed, so there's no plug-in to download. This vastly increases your potential audience. I've set this panorama to auto-rotate so that the viewer can just sit back and observe the architecture. However, you can put your mouse over the panorama and it displays the move cursor. Just drag in the panorama to rotate. You can go up and down, left and right, and view everything there is in 360 degrees. Hold down Shift and drag to zoom in. Hold down Control and drag to zoom out. The PT Viewer is free and open source, and this is the URL where you can learn more about it. Incidentally, I've written an article that explains how you can create an interactive panorama using Photoshop. And this is suitable for taking photos of a job site and turning them into a panorama. Here's an example of the PT Viewer on this web page. Let's get back to our panorama that we exported from 3ds Max. Now I'd like to show you the source code that you can customize to create your own type of panorama. Right now we're looking at panorama.html right here. Let's take a look at that file in a text editor. I'll open it up here in EditPad. And I'll just go through these lines of code with you to show you how you can easily customize the code to suit your situation. The first line here opens the applet, and it references the Java archive and the class within that archive to actually run the panorama. You can change the width and height to suit. This is the actual JPEG file that we exported from 3ds Max. This parameter puts the cursor in move mode so that you can drag to rotate. This parameter sets the initial rotation value of the camera. I set it at -20. Let's see what happens if I set it at 40 and save. I'll refresh the panorama, and we open up in a different view initially. Let's try that again. I'll set it at 120. Save, refresh. We started in a different place. So change that parameter to control what the viewer sees when the panorama initially opens. I turned off the optional toolbar, but you can use that if you want by using true right here. I'll save and reload. Here's the toolbar. It just points out that you can zoom out and zoom in. And if there are any hotspots defined, you can turn them on here. I'm going to turn that back off. Down here, this is the image load feedback. And if you notice very quickly when I refresh, you'll see it says loading image right there, 100%. And because this file is stored locally, that happens very quickly. But if this was a large panorama on a website, you might see that percentage change, and that can be useful. Right here, this is necessary to get the panorama to rotate. You can use a positive or negative value to control the direction of rotation. I'll set this at a negative value and refresh. Now I'm rotating the other way. This last parameter sets the amount of time in seconds that it takes to complete a full rotation. I'll set this to 30 and save, and we ought to be rotating a lot more quickly then. Refresh. And you can see that the rotation speed has really picked up. It's probably better to have a pretty slow rotation so as not to disorient the viewer. I'll set it back to 120. So use the PT Viewer to create a Java panorama that most everyone can view.